So I'm a little bullish on EB-1As right now. So USCIS a couple weeks ago released a policy memorandum that essentially stated that there was a change to the level of discretion that officers may use in certain visa categories. The biggest change when it comes to EB-1As is that there was a limitation that was placed on the amount of discretion that was actually permitted for officers when adjudicating EB-1As. Now, what does that mean? What it means for us and for any petitioner for an EB-1A is that the level of opinion that an officer may utilize when rendering a decision has been ultimately limited.
Welcome, I'm attorney Carlos Colombo. Welcome to our channel here at Colombo and Hurd. And today I have one of my law partners, Anthony DeLucia. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Lovely to be here. Glad to be here.
Now, and today we're going to talk about an interesting topic, something that we have seen grown in popularity in the last few years, the EB-1A. Anthony, tell us a little bit, what is an EB-1A?
Sure. So an EB-1A visa is, for lack of a better term, an alien of extraordinary ability visa. It's the first preference classification. It's for individuals who, for, again, lack of a better term, have risen to the top of their respective field. It is a bifurcated visa. So instead of like a traditional NIW where there may be a three-prong assessment that has a lot of discretion that's involved with an officer, it's a statutorily defined visa wherein an individual either has to have a once-in-a-lifetime achievement award, say a Nobel Prize or an Oscar or something along those lines, or they can meet 3 out of 10 regulatory criteria. Now, certainly you can meet more than 3, but 3 is the bare minimum. And then they are subject to what's called a final merits determination at the end to determine whether or not that individual truly has met the sustained national or international acclaim that's required or is the top of their respective field.
So that's a great explanation, because most people, I think, are familiar with the minimum 3 requirements that you must meet from the list that is in the statute and the law itself. But a lot of people don't know about the second part of the process, which is that final merits. Would you say that even though it's clearly defined, you know, the 3 prongs or the prongs that you can meet, would you say that that final merits gives immigration some discretion then?
I would generally say it does. So when the Ninth Circuit decided Kazarian back in 2010, which is the decision that actually created this whole final merits determination milieu, it was done with the ability, or I guess idea, that the officers would have that modicum of discretion to not just look and say, okay, we have these criteria that are clearly met by the plain language, but giving them a little bit of bandwidth to make a little bit of a decision when it comes to whether or not an individual is an alien of extraordinary ability. Now, that's not without its limits. The Kazarian court was actually very succinct in the way that it decided it, stating that while officers do have a modicum of discretion, it is not unbounded. For example, an officer may not utilize the fact that, say, a petitioner did not claim a particular criteria against them. So it's not a control element for USCIS. It's an ability for them to consider everything in the totality.
Right. And I think that's a great point, because you do see some potential litigation where they go outside the bounds of what has been established precedent, and then you have federal lawsuits challenging those decisions that are successful. Unlike other types of visas where they have more discretion and it's very difficult or sometimes impossible to contest that at the federal level. So for an EB-1A, you know, one of the frequent questions we get as well, but hold on a second, I'm not at the level of a Nobel Prize winner or, you know, a World Cup winner like Lionel Messi. So do I qualify if I'm a professional in a field and I have some awards and I meet some of the criteria, or do I have to be truly at the, you know, at the level of a Nobel Prize winner?
No, so this is where having an attorney actually comes into play. So it's not required that an individual have the best of the best of the best. Certainly, if you are, then obviously EB-1A is a slam dunk. But in terms of just garden variety EB-1As, you do not have to be a Nobel Prize winner. It's a caveat that USCIS provides, an example, for lack of a better term, of what if you don't want to go down the 3 out of the 10 criteria route, what would otherwise be that? But realistically speaking, I've handled thousands of EB-1As, and it's a wide variety. It's individuals who we as attorneys can argue have sustained international or national acclaim, who have risen to the top of their respective field. But it's an important little distinction there. It's not that you have to be the number one. It's not that you have to be even the top 2%. It's, are you generally within the top 10, 15, whatever percent of your field that we as attorneys can argue, which is what we honestly specialize at Colombo and Hurd, is taking that information and presenting all of our clients in the best possible light to give them the best possible chance of success.
And so, taking that, have you seen any trends right now and maybe potentially some future trends on EB-1As that you can talk about?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a little bullish on EB-1As right now. So USCIS a couple weeks ago released a policy memorandum that essentially stated that there was a change to the level of discretion that officers may use in certain visa categories. The biggest change when it comes to EB-1As is that there was a limitation that was placed on the amount of discretion that was actually permitted for officers when adjudicating EB-1As. Now, what does that mean? What it means for us and for any petitioner for an EB-1A is that the level of opinion that an officer may utilize when rendering a decision has been ultimately limited. So it kind of reverts back to that old, pre-2010 adjudication style of, do you meet the plain language of the regulatory criteria for 3 out of the 10? And then can you make fruitful arguments for the final merits? Now, final merits has and forever will be, since 2010, been sort of that stopgap of making sure to get over that hump. Meeting the plain language of 3 out of the 10 can be rather objectively provable. It's a matter of making sure that everything is contextualized throughout the case in that final merits determination, which I do see as a future trend, and even one that we've been doing for the last, I would say, comfortably year and a half, where we've really been attacking that concept of making the story of the case be throughout. It's not good enough just to say that an individual has served as a judge of the work of others. In that actual argument, contextualizing it as this individual has served as a judge of the work of others, that's why they're atop of their respective field, and making that through line all the way through.
Well, and that ties into well with frequent questions on RFEs, requests for additional evidence. I mean, we've seen USCIS has been fairly good in approving EB-1As lately, but RFEs are part of a normal practice of immigration. Have you seen any successful tips that you can give folks on handling RFEs, or any strategies that have worked on RFEs for EB-1As?
Oh, 100%. So the biggest thing on an RFE, it's an opportunity from the officer to dispel any concerns that they may have. And when it comes to EB-1A specifically, most of that revolves around what an officer's interpretation, or even lack thereof, of the actual plain language of the statute. So again, for example, if you talk about the criteria of serves as a judge of the work of others, it's important to make sure that you're hitting each of those words. And I know it almost seems like Law School 101, going back to making sure that you're identifying each individual issue, but it's actually very probative here. When you are addressing any of the criteria for an EB-1A, you have to make sure you're hitting each element. So did an individual serve? Were they actually taking part in it? It's not good enough to just be invited to do it. You have to actually complete it. As a judge, were they in a position where they actually had to render an opinion, or had a position of authority over someone else's work to render an opinion of the work of others? It has to be someone else in the field, but more importantly, it's not generally accepted that it's just for students. That there are caveats, certainly, but that's where that nuance of having an attorney comes in, of understanding what does of the work of others mean? And not to borrow a line from a former president, Bill Clinton, but it does sometimes come down to what the definition of is, and that's very pertinent when it comes to EB-1A practice.
So, again, we started with a lot of clients may know what the basic requirements and meeting the three criteria, what they may be. A lot of folks don't know about the final merits, but there is some positive uh, feedback from the Trump administration on trying to limit some of that discretion that we've seen used in the past few years. I think it's a good opportunity for folks to strongly consider an EB-1A, and sometimes clients come to us with an idea of doing maybe an EB-2 NIW or some other type of case, and eventually we see that they may have a strong EB-1A, and hey, it's certainly worth taking a good shot at that, especially since for the most part, rest of the world, especially EB-1A is current for the visa bulletin. That's always a good opportunity to take. What would you advise those folks that are perhaps on the ropes considering, should I do an EB-1A? Should I even try to have a consultation with an attorney about it? What advice would you give those considering an EB-1A today?
Sure. So it's really two things. Number one, don't be shy. Even if you're going to go down an NIW route or an EB-1A route, doesn't matter. The whole point of it is to brag about you. The whole point of it is to contextualize you in the best possible light. So there's no shame in looking and saying, I do think that I am good enough. I do think that my credentials might actually meet this. And number two, I got to be honest with you, the best course of action is to just talk to an attorney, is to just speak to somebody who has the experience, who does know generally what the current trends are, what it is that an EB-1A is and is not. And just because if you are interested in the EB-1A, it may not be the best fit for you, that doesn't mean an NIW may not be the right course of action. And in the alternative, you may go into it, as you said, Carlos, thinking NIW, but then an EB-1A is actually the better route. So ultimately, relying upon the experience, guidance, and advice of an attorney who has been through the ringer, who knows what's going on, for lack of a better term, is your best guiding principle.
Yeah, and not waiting, which is always what I tell clients, is demand keeps growing in these categories. The Trump administration had said they want to try to attract the brightest and the best. They want to attract folks that are in the national interest. So whether it's EB-1A, EB-2 NIW, that's what we specialize here at Colombo and Hurd. There's a link at the bottom of this video where you can send us your profile, and experienced attorneys like my partner, Anthony, will take a look at your background. And you don't have to make the final decision whether it's EB-1A or NIW when you hire us necessarily. Like Anthony said, sometimes we may change our mind once we sit down and carefully review the evidence, because one thing is a consultation where we get a fairly good feeling for a path forward, and another is once we get into the weeds of the case and understanding every single nuance that a case may have. So that's a normal part of the process, and it's a free consultation that we offer here at the firm. So don't be shy. Like Anthony said, you are basically marketing yourself to the immigration officer to try to sell yourself as one of the best in the world, which many, many of our clients are. So it's a pleasure always sharing these latest trends, especially in EB-1As and NIWs with all of you. You can always follow our YouTube channel here by subscribing. Anthony, a pleasure sharing this information with you today. Anthony, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me.